Hi, everybody. Today we're going to learn about RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Do you know who she is? Do you know why she is famous? So you should be looking at this video right now. I'm going to move me a little bit and make sure you click around the room. I tried to give you other suggestions to read after the lesson that you can check out from the library. You always start with number 1, and there is the lesson under there. And you see my little bit emoji. And then afterwards, you have a brain pop to do. You do need the ID and the password that I listed here. And you might recognize this face matches this face. So you should be able to maybe do some pre-reading now and try to figure out who she is and what she's about. And then, of course, pick and respond down here is a lesson. While you're reading, I'd like you to take a piece of white paper. You can draw a little Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the middle if you like, real quick. And there's a quote in there: "Fight for the things that you care about in a way that will lead others to join you." Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That is one of the quotes that you may choose at the end to respond to. As you're listening to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Case of the RBG of Inequality, write down her accomplishments. Why is she famous? Now, the reason why I'm having you do this is because in 4th and 5th grade, you really need to start to learn research skills. Now, some of you have some good skills already. We want to just fine tune them. So the first thing we need to start really thinking about in these grades is citing your source. And I wrote the source you're going to use today down. All you need to do is copy it. So the author's last name goes first, Winter, J, period. This was published in 2017 with parentheses around, period. And then titles of the book get italicized. That's why the letters are on an angle, italicized. On paper, you underline. So you will underline it because you're not typing. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Case of the RBG versus Inequality. New York, New York, meaning it was published in the city of New York, in the state of New York, by Abrams Books for Young Readers. That's the publisher. So on your paper, you're going to take notes in your own words. So I told you to get the blank piece of paper, and you can quickly draw the outline of RBG like I have below, and take notes on why RBG is famous only. Now, when you're doing a biography, a lot of times you find out things like where they're born or when they were born or where. But I want you to focus on why they're famous. Why are we reading about her? Why are there books about her? That's what's important. So while you're listening to the book, take notes on your piece of paper, maybe circle each fact you wrote down about her so you have that at the end. This is what you're going to be working on. You'll identify 3 to 5 reasons minimum. You can come up with more from the book. Why Ruth Bader Ginsburg is famous from the book, biography book, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Case of the RBG versus Inequality. Watch and take photos. I can cite my source to avoid plagiarism. We'll talk more about that word throughout this year. I can put my notes in my own words to, again, avoid plagiarism. I will pick one quote at the end of the lesson. I will pick one quote to respond to and compare to myself and the world around me, which is text to self. So those are the 3 things of your lesson. You'll also watch a brain pop on the Supreme Court Justice, giving you kind of a clue of who RBG is. At the end of the lesson, you'll have these 5 quotes in front of you. Just pick one, response paragraph. Start with the quote. So write down the quote you pick on your piece of paper and explain in your words what Ruth Bader Ginsburg is saying. Finish your paragraph with how this relates or affects your life. Text to self. Enjoy the book. The book here is called Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a biography. You would find this in the biography And if you recall, it's the last three letters of the person's name they're talking about. In the Hanover libraries, it's 92, GIN. Sometimes in the public library, you would find it under B, GIN. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Case of RBG versus Inequality by Joan Winter, illustrated by Stacy Ernest. Now this book, if you see at the top of my screen, is from Sora. And if we go from our class link, here's Sora button right here, Sora by Overdrive. You can also go to the Pamunkey Regional Library and get your library card there and use their Sora. And they are now connected, so the books are connected, so you can check out even more books. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Case of RBG, Inequality. The first thing is when we're doing our pre-reading, we see that she's in this very long black gown. If you don't know who she is, that might give you a clue of what kind of job she does. There's a flag behind her, so something with America if you don't know who she is. It's the case, like, what does that mean? The case. And inequality. I hope you know what that word means by now, but I pulled up the Merriam-Webster's dictionary and put in inequality. Now, the word equal means we're all the same, but inequality is unequal. Okay, that little prefix right there changes the word equal to the opposite, right? So the quality of being unequal or uneven, such as social disparity, disparity of distribution or opportunity, lack of evenness, the condition of being variable, changeableness. That's a tongue twister. You see the end pages, and if you look, you obviously know what this is. It already starts our story about Ruth, and she's obviously grabbing a book. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, title page by Jonah Winter, illustrated by Stacy Ernest. The Case of RBG versus Inequality. The publisher at the bottom, Abraham Books for Young Readers, and they're located in New York. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, during this trial, you will learn about a little girl who had no clue just how important she would become. You will see the unfair world she was born into, where boys were valued more than girls, where women were not encouraged to achieve and aspire. You will see evidence of that unfairness, just as she herself has seen her whole life. Here are the facts of her case. Ruth Bader was born March 15, 1933, the daughter of two Jewish parents whose families had fled Europe for Brooklyn, New York, to escape anti-Jewish persecution. Her father owned a fur shop for many years. When the shop went out of business, he got a job at the clothing store. He was uneducated. He had never finished high school. This page tells a lot of stuff about her background and how her parents escaped persecution in the 1930s when she was young. What war maybe was going on? And this is something that you really learn more about when you're a little older, but some of you may know the answer. Good, some of you knew it was World War II. So the Jewish people had escaped Europe and come to America. And if you want to take the time to look up the word persecution, that'd be a great word to look up. The act or practice of persecuting, especially those who differ in origin, religion, or social outlook. The condition of being persecuted, harassed, or annoyed. So, origin or religion, the Jewish people were one of the population that Hitler in World War II persecuted and didn't think were equal. Ruth's mother graduated from high school at the age of 15, smart enough that she might have gone to college, but at this point in history, girls were discouraged from going to college. So Ruth's mother got a job to help pay for her brother's college education. Next came marriage and a husband who discouraged her from working outside the home. Like many men of this time, he thought that a woman's place was in the home. That was what Ruth saw as a girl. Now let's think about this for a minute. Is this how we are today in America? Are men are the only ones that are supposed to work? Can women work if they choose to? What Ruth also saw was a mother who loved books and loved to read, and a mother who wanted her daughter to have the good education that she herself had been denied. Ruth saw a mother who saved every penny she could for her daughter to someday go to college. I love it, the old-fashioned hide the money in the cookie jar. Beautiful illustrations. Once a week, Ruth's mother dropped her off at the local library, which was above a Chinese restaurant, and left her there while she was getting her hair done. There's her in the little window. Surrounded by books and the smell of Chinese food, Ruth would choose 3 books to take home for the week. She liked books about mythology and Nancy Drew's series. This all happened in Brooklyn, which was long been home to lots of Jewish families and businesses. Brooklyn has also been home to anti-Jewish violence and vandalism. During the 1930s and 40s, to be Jewish in America was to know anti-Semitism. That's a huge word. Let's talk about that. We now offer evidence anti-Semitism experienced firsthand by Ruth, a sign outside a resort in Pennsylvania, seen by her parents' car. It said, "No dogs or Jews allowed." This happened right here in America. Now, these kind of signs really showed how people judged other people. There's another point in history that you might recall by studying Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks. Does anybody recall a sign they might have seen in that part of history? Pause for a second and talk about it. Yes. Good, I heard some of your answers. So some of your answers might be no coloreds allowed, whites only. So anti-Semitism, let's look up that word. Hostility towards discrimination against Jews as a religious, ethnic, or racial group. It's very sad that in our history, we have this happen over and over again. Right now in our book, they're talking about during World War II and the years following that, how the Jewish people were put down and treated differently and discriminated against. Magna Carta. Being smart can be a great defense against such meanness and stupidity. And Ruth was one smart cookie. She tied for the highest grades in her elementary school. She wrote an essay about the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights called Landmarks of Constitutional Freedom, evidence of an early interest in law and justice in words. This is not to say she always knew what she wanted to be. In high school, Ruth had many interests and hobbies, editing the school newspaper, playing cello in the orchestra, even twirling a baton at football games, and once clipping a tooth in the process. The day on which Ruth would graduate from high school with honors promised to be a glorious day. She ranked 6th out of a class of 700, and she had won the New York State scholarship for college. But Ruth was nowhere to be seen at the ceremony. That's because she stayed home. Ruth's mother had been ill with cancer for 4 years, and on the very day Ruth was to graduate, her mother died. Instead of wearing a cap and gown and being honored, Ruth was mourning the death of the person she loved the most in the world, the person whose dream was to see Ruth go on to college and become an independent woman. There was only one thing for Ruth to do. Suitcase in hand, she arrived at Cornell University, the same university her mother's brother had gone, the same university her mother might have gone to had she been encouraged. It was 1950, and very few girls went to college. At Cornell, male students outnumbered female students 4 to 1. For a girl to get into Cornell, she had to be very smart, but she had to pretend not to be smart if she wanted a boy to ask her out on a date. She would not be seen studying. This was a problem for Ruth, who was a very serious student. Her solution was to do her studying in the bathroom where no boys would see her. That's just how things were. And then along came Martin Ginsburg. Martin was different from any boy she'd ever met. He liked that she had a brain, and Ruth was different from any girl he'd met. She had dreams of having a career, of being independent. She spoke only when she had something interesting to say, and she was always listening, always thinking, always learning. I think sometimes we need to think about this ourselves. She was always listening, not always talking. I think sometimes we need to think about things and do more listening than sometimes talking. In her constitutional law class, Ruth learned about freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Freedoms of all Americans are guaranteed in the Constitution. She learned about a senator named Joseph McCarthy, who was trying to take away these important rights, and brave lawyers who were fighting him in court. Learning about these lawyers made Ruth want to become one. She believed she could be a good lawyer and support herself. But the decision to become a lawyer was not an easy one for a woman to make in 1954. There were very few female lawyers in America. Ruth's own father discouraged her from going to law school because he believed she wouldn't get a job. Besides, her place was in the home. Isn't that sad? That even her own father thought that the woman's place was in the home. Now we know that if a woman chooses to be in the home, that's fine. But she doesn't have to be. She can be anything she sets out to be. Ruth refused to listen to her father. She saw no reason why she would not become a lawyer. She was just as smart and capable as any man. Her verdict was final. She would go to law school, but first she would get married to her first and only love, Martin Ginsburg. And now, girls and boys of the jury, we offer into evidence some of the more outrageous nonsense Ruth endured before, during, and after law school. Exhibit A. It was her first job out of college, right before law school. Her boss demoted her and slashed her wages because he saw she was pregnant. This was a common practice. What could Ruth do? Do you know what this word demoted means? Demoted? Let's look it up. To reduce to lower grade or rank. To relegate to a less important position. So do you think that was fair that her boss demoted her just because she was pregnant? I hope not. I hope you don't think that. Exhibit B, arrival at Harvard Law School, where there was only 9 women in the class of 500. Harvard did not even provide a place for the woman to live. Not very welcoming. Exhibit C, in the law library, she was barred from entering the periodical room because she was a woman. The guard would not let her in, nor help her in any way. She needed a book from this room. How was she supposed to complete her assignment? Lots of inequalities happening here in the book and in her life, obviously. Exhibit E. One night, the law school dean invited all 9 female students, including Ruth, to dinner at his house. He sat each woman next to a male law professor. He then went around the table asking each female student why she thought she deserved a spot in this law school that could have gone to a man. Ruth's answer? To better understand the work of my husband. Exhibit D. Most classes had just one woman per class. For comic relief, the professor in the lecture hall would often call on the lone woman, such as Ruth, as if it were a joke, but the woman almost always answered correctly. She had to. She was representing all women. I love that. I love that line. She was representing all women. Why? Pause and talk about that. Why was she representing all women? Maybe your answer was because she had the ability to stand up for women's rights and the inequality, and she was educating herself to do so. Amazing. And yet, without Ruth's help, her husband, who was also a student at Harvard Law School, would not have graduated. He became gravely ill and was unable to attend classes. Ruth went to his classes for him and took notes so that he could pass his courses. She also took care of him, took care of their newborn baby, Jane, went to her own classes, and was editor of the Harvard Law Review. Martin recovered, graduated, and got a job at a law firm in New York City. So Ruth transferred from Harvard Law School to New York's Columbia Law School and tied for first in her class when she graduated. Surely Ruth would get a job, right? But at Columbia's Job Placement Center, most jobs postings said men only. Remember, we talked about signs that we have seen that showed discrimination in the past. The one in the book was Jews only. And then we had mentioned that during the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, or, Ruby Bridges, when she was the first African-American to go into elementary school when she was a little girl, you would see signs maybe that said whites only or no coloreds or things, discriminating signs. Think about that. Think about how that would make you feel. Exhibit F. Even among the law firms supposedly open to hiring women, not one firm would hire her. She was a woman, she was Jewish, and she was a mother. Ruth just struggled and moved on, first to a job as a law clerk, then as a law professor, only to encounter unfairness again and again. Exhibit G. At Rutgers University, she found out that female professors would be paid less than male professors. She and another woman sued the school and won. Her pile, his pile. I love the visual the illustrator gave us on how much money she's making versus how much he's making. Exhibit H. Ruth would speak up at faculty meetings and the male professors would totally ignore her. A male professor would then say the very same thing that Ruth had said and get acknowledgement for being smart. This kept happening even after Ruth became Columbia's first tenured female law professor. By the 1970s, a lot of women had enough of this sort of treatment. They took part in protests and demonstrations with signs saying, "Enough is enough. Equal pay for equal jobs, women's liberation, and equality." It wasn't Ruth's style to take part in protests, but she did do something. An organization called the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, asked Ruth to be in charge of the court cases involving women's inequality. The reason they asked her? Because she was a woman and they thought this was woman's work. There was no end to the disrespect. Nonetheless, Ruth accepted the position, and in 1972, she became the leader of the ACLU Women's Rights Project, a battle in the courts against unfairness to women. She also led lawyers for 6 Supreme Court cases and won 5 of them. She was the lead lawyer for 6 Supreme Court cases and won 5 of them. Though Ruth herself was not a revolutionary, she did for women was revolutionary. She won the right for women to get equal protection of the laws, to be treated equal as men. Ruth became a lawyer not to change the world. She became a lawyer because she knew she had the verbal and analytical skills to handle the job as well as any man. But here she was, the most important female lawyer in America, fighting and winning legal battles for all American women. Here she was, changing the world. That's why in 1980, she was chosen by President Jimmy Carter to become a judge for the most important court of law in America besides the Supreme Court, the U.S. Court of Appeals. She was only the second woman in history to serve on this court. Now it was her job to make judgments, to judge what was and wasn't legal. A good judge listens closely, chooses word carefully, and values fairness above all else. This job suited Ruth perfectly. There, of course, is President Jimmy Carter. And some of you might recognize this face right here as President Bill Clinton. After 13 years of being a judge, at age 60, Ruth got a phone call one night. It was from President Bill Clinton. He wanted to appoint her to the Supreme Court to be just the second female Supreme Court justice in history. As a girl, Ruth never dreamed she would be a lawyer or a judge, much less a Supreme Court justice. In her acceptance speech, she spoke of her mother. I pray that I may be all that she would have been if she had lived in an age when women could aspire and achieve, and daughters were cherished just as much as sons. Look at this beautiful illustration. And look, notice all these men, and look at their faces, having their backs slightly turned. He even looks like he's kind of peeking over at Ruth Ginsburg, and there she is sitting there all alone. When Ruth arrived at the court, the first female Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, was still serving. When Sandra retired, Ruth was the only woman on the Supreme Court for a few years, tiny and outnumbered. And yet, what she brought to the court was enormous: dignity, civility, intelligence, and soft-spoken manner. She brought some of the most powerful, strongly worded dissents in the Supreme Court history. A dissent is when a Supreme Court justice disagrees with the opinion of the majority of the 9 judges. In Ruth's case, a dissent often involves a written statement, perfectly worded, that rips apart the opinion of the majority. You often see this word dissent associated with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So again, in Ruth's case, a dissent often involves a written statement, perfectly worded, that rips apart the opinions of the majority. Now, think about that. Being as the only woman, did you think she had some of the same opinions as these men? Physical toughness is another of Ruth's trademarks. In 2009, she found out she had cancer and needed surgery. Only 19 days after her operation, she returned to the court. She did so because she wanted people, especially young women, to see at least one woman on the Supreme Court. At any number of points in her life, Ruth could have given up. She could have listened to her father. She could have dropped out of law school. She could have abandoned in search of a job. She could have accepted being paid less than her male associates. Instead, she stayed on the difficult path she chose for herself, removing one obstacle after another, until she arrived at the very court that is the symbol of justice in America. There can be just one verdict: because she did not give up, because she refused to let other people define her limitations as a person, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has herself become a symbol of justice in America. No dogs or Jews allowed, men only. Picture of her parents. Equal justice under the law. Glossary page for this book. You can see some of the amendment, what amendment means, American Civil Liberties Union, Anti-Semitism, prejudice, discrimination, vandalism against other people who are Jewish. We talked about that. We also talked about dissent in the context of the Supreme Court case, a Supreme Court justice argument written in response of the court's majority opinions. It can be spelled out, the argument, for future Supreme Court decision and can serve the purpose of protesting an unfair law. In one dissent, Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire Rubber Company, Justice Ginsburg wrote that Congress could change a particular law, and she read her strong dissent aloud. Soon after, Congress responded to her challenge with the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Play Act of 2009, which gives employees more rights to challenge wage discrimination through lawsuits. That's great. And that's talking about how men, remember that page with the pile of money, how the woman made such a little pile of money and the men made a big pile of money for the same job. Here's a good one. Supreme Court Justice, the term used to describe any of the 9 members of the Supreme Court, the highest ranking judges in America. Which one of you will sit on this court? The highest ranking judges in America. And it ends with the same page like in the front, closing the book, the end covers, the end pages, which tells part of the story. And this was repeated again. It was in the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, during this trial, you will learn about a little girl who had no clue just how important she would become. You will see the unfair world she was born into, where boys were valued more than girls, where women were not encouraged to achieve and aspire. You will see evidence of the unfairness, just as she herself had seen it all her life. Here are the facts to her case. Now that you did some research using the book Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The Case of the RBG of Inequality, share some of the accomplishments you wrote down with your classmates. The next part of your lesson is to watch the Brain Pop on Supreme Court to find more about what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did there. The last part of your lesson is number 3, Pick and Respond on your Bitmoji classroom. When you open the Pick and Respond, you will see the 5 quotes. Read all 5. Pick one that you would like to respond to. So your response paragraph, you start with the quote, explain it in your own words, what Ruth Bader Ginsburg is saying, and then try to connect it to your own life, text to self. How can we use these words in our life? When you're finished, share with your classmates or your family.